Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Deziel and today I'm going to talk about tailor waistband. First I'll show you a few samples, then I'll show you how to make the pattern. I'm going to start with a sample of a man pant to show you the basic characteristic. A tailor waistband is usually cut in the middle, so you could have the outside and the inside in two different fabric. Another characteristic is that usually tailor waistband are combined with the tailor fly. What I mean is that the bottom one, the double one, is usually shaped and goes wider towards the top, and also it's often made in a different fabric. The small fly piece is most of the time finished with a bias. Another thing that most of the tailor waistband have is that double closure system. You have first a button for the inside and you have a large hook for the outside. I will continue with a women's pant that still has that double closure system and the center back seam. It's to show you another characteristic that you'll find in most of the tailor waistband, and we usually see it on the top part. It is the fact that the top part of the waistband is continuing towards the inside, usually pretty much the width of the fly piece. Now I show you a third sample. This one is also a women's pant, and for this one you might notice that there's no seam at the center back, but for women very often you're going to see the seam at the side seam. And what's special about this one, but very often we see it on tailor waistband, it's an extension on the top piece. And even with the extension, here you could see that my top piece is continuing to the inside. So to avoid having a seam at the end, it's continuing until just a little bit further than the fly piece. Now finally, my last example that have most of the characteristics that I talked about before. I have the finishing with the bias for the inside piece. I have the shape and wider on top fly piece. And here the little detail that I wanted to talk about is something that you see also very often is the shape of the under part, the end of your waistband. Here you could see that it's like a round. You could find arrow or point, and you could find angle. Those little details just make it more interesting to look at from the inside. Now to start, what I suggest is that you make little block for your back waistband and your front waistband. So here I have my half back waist measurement and my half front waist measurement, and you make your little piece, the finish width that you want for your waistband. Here I did it 4 centimeter wide, but you could see some at 3 centimeter up to 5 centimeter. The second thing I did is that I placed notches to indicate my side seam, and this is going to be important so I don't mix up my piece. Now right on top you see also a shape waistband. I wanted to take a minute to talk to you about the difference between the two of them. Usually the completely straight waistband, they're going to be sewn at the waist of a skirt or a pant that is above the waist. As soon as your waistband goes below the waist, you should have a shape waistband that comes from your pattern. The other thing you're going to need is one of your fly piece, because we're going to need the width of that fly piece. Usually they're a minimum of 3.5 centimeter wide, and it goes until maybe 4.5 or 5 centimeter wide. For today's example, I'm going to use my shape waistband block, but it would be exactly the same step if your pattern is completely straight. I will start with my back pattern. That would be one piece for the inside, the same thing inside and outside. So I'm going to take a stripe of paper and fold it in the middle. I'm going to retrace my back waistband. My notch that I placed was for the side seam. I want my center back to be unfolded, and I will trace all around. Now before to add the seam allowance and cut my pattern, I'm going to ask you to add notches. Back pattern piece should have a double notch somewhere. Here I'm going to place it at the center back. So by placing a notch at 5 millimeters from the fold of the paper, when the piece is open, I'm going to have my double notch indicating that it's a back piece. I'll do that 5 millimeter notch on top and at the bottom. Now my pattern piece is finished. I just have to do my grain line, and most of the time it's going to be placed just like this towards the length of the waistband. And this piece would be cut twice in self fabric and twice in fusing. Now for the front, I'm coming back with my sample because in the front we'll have more than one pattern piece. My sample that I'm showing you is going to have 3 different pattern pieces. Here, as you could see, the longest one is the one that goes on top, the one that has the overlap, and also on top of the overlap, it's folding inside, continuing until even a little further than the fly piece. And that's the pattern that we will start with. Now it's time to trace the front piece. You remember that my notch was the side seam, so I need longer distance on the center front. The first thing we will do is add the extension that we have on top of the pant. I did a very long extension until maybe 10 centimeter, and the smallest one are maybe 3 or 4 centimeter. The one that I will do today is a 5 centimeter extension, so I'm going to trace it and then close the box. Then after adding the extension, we're going to add what we want to fold inside. So we do need, of course, the same 5 centimeter extension for the inside part. Then from that 5 centimeter, we'll add an extra measurement that cover at least the width of the fly. Now on my pattern, I'm going to do this little box again one more time to add the inside extension. So another 5 centimeter and close the box. Now for that extra that I was talking about, you're going to need your fly piece because like I said, it should be a minimum of the width of the fly. But to do even a better job, I'm going to add an extra centimeter to that measurement. We have the first piece, so here is the center front. We have the extension again to fold in. So that's going to be the center front as well. And that's the extra that we have towards the side seam. Now we could put the seam allowance. As you could see, I did cut, but not on the final line. I just kept a little bit all around because I'm going to need for the front 3 different pattern pieces. So I'm going to layer 3 pieces of paper before cutting the notch on the side seam. Then with the tracing wheel, you're going to do or indicate your center front. Separate the pieces. Now we're going to finish the first pattern piece, so the longest one with the extension. We'll start by doing the notch. So you're going to take your pattern and fold it at the end of the extension so we could place the center front over the center front. And now we'll be able to do the notch, top and bottom, at the center front. Then to write the information, you're going to place your pattern piece exactly like the fabric. So you have to turn it around. Here I have my side seam on the side seam and the center front at the center front. This is the right side of my pattern. I will be able to trace my grain line here again, 90 degrees with the grain line. This piece needs to be cut only 1 time in fabric and 1 time in fusing. Now the last information we must put on this piece is for the cutting. This pattern piece has to be cut the right side of the fabric up, so right side up. Now we will continue with the inside of that waistband piece. As you know, this piece is going to be folded in. So the inside piece is going to start exactly where the folding finish. at the seam line and go all the way to the side seam. On my sample, it's going to be from here all the way to the side seams. To do the inside part, I took a second piece that I cut before, and I'm going to overlap that first piece that is finished. Notice that it's folded the right place. Make sure you overlap your notches so there's no confusion. You're going to trace with the tracing wheel the final measurement or placement of the top waistband that is folding back. So right here at the seam line. Now I could separate my piece and retrace that new line. Now I'm keeping both pieces one next to the other for you to see the overlapping or the direction of the seam allowance. Here you could see on my first piece I had the seam allowance this way, but the same line for my inside piece I'm going to add my seam allowance in the other direction. We now complete the second piece for this side of the waistband. We can now trace the grain line, again 90-degree with that line. This piece is still going to be cut only one time, but here you have the choice or self fabric or a combination or a lining fabric. Then whatever fabric you decide to use for this inside piece, I suggest you also fuse it. So cut it one time in fusing. The last information you have to put on your pattern piece, the RSUP, to cut it right side of the fabric up. Now finally the last piece, so the other side that goes with the wider fly piece. For today's example, it's going to be the same pattern piece used for the outside and the inside. That means you're going to have a seam at the end of the waistband. Now again, you could see that I have the notch, so this is my side seam and the dotted line is my center front. So from the center front, what I need is only the width of my fly piece. So I'm going to use my fly piece, put it right next to the center front and trace. Since I'm using patterns that don't have seam allowance, I'm going to need to add a seam allowance parallel to that last line. Again, I'm going to trace my grain line square with one of these lines. Here, just like I show you, I decide to write down to cut twice, one time for inside, one time for outside, and same thing for the fusing. Now, if you decide you want to do the inside with another fabric, it could be interesting. In that case, instead of writing cutting 2 in fabric, you would write cut 1 time in fabric, right side up, and 1 time in the combination fabric, other side up. This is the abbreviation when you have to turn your pattern around. So we did complete the waistband pattern. That's it for today. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. I see you next time.